Hey everyone, you are listening to Virtuous Society, where we share community expert insights and secrets. It's really easy in this world to not try and give up when things are hard. Today we speak to Brycent, streamer and startup founder that have went from peaking at thousands of viewers to streaming to just several people once the market crashed, only to build it back up again, even stronger. We have unpacked his insights and thoughts regarding community and content and why he feels he made the right decision by playing the long game. If you are an aspiring content creator or building a community using content, you will gain so much from this conversation. Welcome, Brycent. How are you?
I'm good. It's early here, not too early in the United States, but early enough. But yeah, things are good. I'm excited. The world is like really excited about gaming right now, so it makes my day a lot easier.
Nice. Yeah, it feels like we had a shift in sentiment in the last couple of months or weeks, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing. You know, like having a world where for a long time people didn't care too much about gaming, and now we're moving into a space where it's a bit more focused. I would say less on the gaming side and more on the token side, but we'll get to more of that later.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to actually kick it off with a huge question, in my opinion.
Okay.
How does it feel for you to lead a community that is centered around your own personal brand?
I mean, I don't think it's, it feels good, of course. Like, I don't think I would have envisioned this when I was in high school or college. Like, oh my goodness, you're going to like be full-time playing video games, streaming every day. And it's fun because like, it is like living out a personal dream of being like one of the probably less than 1% of people who get to the point where they can make enough money making content off of video games to be able to do it full time. So it is fun. And it's a blessing to be able to like have a strong community, and definitely not anything I would have ever expected. I think, you know, my path before, I was an engineer, and when I was in college, I was actually studying to be a lawyer. So it's been a long time coming, and definitely a shift from my original thought process, but I learn more every single day.
Amazing. So how did you get here? Like, how did you turn from a guy studying to be a lawyer and coding and doing like engineering stuff into starting to stream and building the community that you now have and being the center point of it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty long question, but, you know, it started out, I would say, you know, I was in college, but growing up, I always played video games. Like, from the time where I had my first, I would say, Game Boy Color, I was always big into games, playing them, spending too much time in them. It was like games and basketball. That was kind of like my jam. And as I grew older, you know, teenage years, my mother would always, even from like, I would say 9, 10, she would take me to like different gaming events, anything I could find on the internet at the time. I'm 28. So, you know, it was a little bit different back then. You didn't have all the resources you have now on the internet where you could play games. Like, we had like game battles and a ton of other things, but I've always been a lifelong gamer, was always into content creating in terms of like seeing people creating gameplay videos online, and it was something I was always interested in. So as I got older, of course, you get older, you get to a point where you can make more money, so you can actually do things. You know, I got to college and tried my foray. I played, you know, Call of Duty competitively, then found Counter-Strike, played Counter-Strike for a bit. It was fun, made content during that time period, took a break from it, finished school, and, you know, I graduated with a degree in political science. So the idea was like, all right, you know, with a political science degree, it's very vague. So you either go work, you know, for a government agency or something like that, sure, or you jump into the legal space. And at the time, you know, growing up, you're told, oh my goodness, like, you're good at talking, you're good at going back and forth, arguing, debating, all these things. So, you know, my original thought process was like, all right, law school makes sense. You go, you get out, you can make good money. But as I got older, you know, especially like getting to the point of graduating and realizing like, oh shit, like you can go very deep in debt for something that, you know, it isn't a given if you're going to make a lot of money. It's very much predicated on like, it's a business, you know, you're your own, I would say your own small business as a lawyer, and you make enough money based on like the work you put in. So as a business model, it started making less sense for me. And when I graduated, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to like 86 the law school thing and just focus on, you know, learning more about the tech space. Got a job in tech sales, taught myself how to code like in a 6-month span, got a really high paying job. I went from making like 40 grand to like 110,000 in like 6 months. And that was just like a full stack engineer, AWS, front end with React.js for those who are like going to watch this and actually know what coding, like know how to code, and a lot of like AWS services on the back end, leveraging like Node.js and Lambda functions. So it was an interesting journey to become an engineer, but it helped me get to the gaming space because from there I was working, in an office, and COVID happened, and from there I was able to work from home, which created this world where now I'm like getting to work and do my tickets every single day at home, and I have all this time because COVID's happened and like no one's going outside. So I just started playing video games again, and I'm making good money at the time. I think like, doing really well, living in my grandmother's basement, making 6 figures, very minimal bills. And I was like, well, I'm just going to like bullshit after work. I don't have anything to do. I'm going to play video games. And that's where I got into just gaming again. And at the time stumbled across a podcast. It was like Andrew Steinwald over at Suffermion. He's they invest in like Web3 related projects, but came across that, and there was a guy chatting on there about like, digital land and digital Pokemon, and it ended up being Axie Infinity. So I went online to learn more.
Interesting.
And of course, no one's playing the game at the time. This is like 2021, early 2021. Like there is a small like group of people playing, but like there's no content being made on the game. No one's on Twitch. And I realized like it could be like, this could be bigger if it's supposed to be the future of gaming. So I started streaming, and this was like April of 2021. And like within a couple of months, it really took off. But what I realized, and where everyone was going wrong, like most of the people who were playing Axie were in the Philippines, but no one was optimizing and creating content for people that lived out there. So the way I like grew my Twitch stream is Axie had this very big Discord where there was like a Filipino sub chat, and they were kind of like, I would say like the ugly stepchildren in a sense, because people saw them as scholar farmers and that's all they saw them as. So what I did was I said, no, wait, if you guys are looking for scholarships and a good way to learn about the game and learn about, Web3 and the future of finance, you can come watch my Twitch streams. And I was the original person that created the idea of watch to earn. So it actually like went from me averaging like maybe 50 to 100 people to like averaging like 4,000 or 5,000 concurrent viewers in the span of like a couple of months. Yeah. So like, I definitely think I was the guy who ushered in like a lot of the early play to earn energy into social platforms like Twitter and Twitch, because most of the Filipinos and people that were playing to earn, they were on Facebook. They weren't really like in the ether of Twitch and Twitter. And then when that happened, I was making enough money at that point to just go full time and like build on my brand as like, I would say, one of the leading faces and people of influence in the Web3 gaming space. And, from there, launched a company, launched a gaming guild called Loot Squad. The play to earn world kind of fizzled out, and I've realized like there was a lot of like downsides to the original play to earn model. So we ended up pivoting Loot Squad. Eventually, decided that it wasn't working, and me and my co-founders we shut it down and pivoted and went in a different direction. Me personally, I just went 100% on my content, and I think they just went back to their daily lives. So after we returned money to investors there, which was like 2023. I was just full-time playing video games again. So that's what I'm doing now, have been doing for a while, and now contributing to Game 7, which is a little bit different because, I'm kind of tasked to do things on a regular basis more than I would be if I'm just doing my own stuff, which is kind of like a blessing and a curse also. So things have been good. I would say like I've gotten into the space of now being able to invest in games, like be early to a lot of stuff. And to me, that's what's most important now. Like I want to keep making content, expand my content, because I don't think Web3 is a big enough bubble, even with the amount of gaming stuff that's happening, to be able to actually sway audiences enough to make any of these games sustainable. So now it's about growing outside of Web3, building up bigger connectivity layers and getting out of the clusterfuck of the same conversations to be able to like build a brand that expands beyond just that circle jerk. And on top of that, being able to invest in the games I play, like angel investing. I think that like as a creator, you're always put in a position where you only get paid based on the content you're making, but you never really make it big unless you have like either you go crazy, like you get to millions and millions of followers, or you start investing. So I've gotten very deep into like angel investing and looking to put my money in places where it'll work for me, which is like, I think super valuable, because every person in the Twitch streaming space, regardless of your size, you probably have some sort of lifespan for how long you're willing to do it. So yeah, that's kind of like the journey of where I at and where I was and where I'm at now, which is like, contributing to Game 7, making content full time, working with brands, and, working on my own redacted startup in my spare time as well.
Nice. Okay, so there is a lot to unpack there, and I want to actually start with the transition from pretty much understanding that your communication skills can serve you elsewhere, if that's a correct assumption, with you starting to stream, because it feels like you started to stream out of kind of feeling out the opportunity. You knew there is an opportunity there, but you didn't necessarily envision the future that you now possess. So talk me through that. Like how did that transition actually went about? When did you actually made the decision, okay, I'm going to focus on this full time?
I mean, I was already pretty big by the time I chose to like go full time on it. Like I was making like 10 grand a month, like streaming on Twitch. And in my first year, I didn't do any deals. So it was all just like Twitch revenue and like living off of my Twitch revenue and, you know, whatever I traded with on the side. So like once I realized like I had a large enough audience where like streaming made sense full time, I was just like, I'm just going to leave my job and do it. Like this was like maybe a couple of months after I started it. So if I started in April, this was like probably like June or July. It happened that quick. And by then I was like completely cooking. So it wasn't really a moment of like, at first it was just like, okay, this is something I do on the side. But once it got big enough, I was just like, yeah, no brainer. We'll go full time and try it out. If it didn't work, I always look at things and like, what's the worst case scenario if some doesn't work? Worst case scenario is like, of course you die. Like if you try something and it doesn't work and like the worst fatal thing happens. But beyond that, the other worst case scenarios are like, either you go in debt, you don't have enough money, you have to move back in with your family, stuff that like is always manageable. It's never a thing where like it's uncomfortable, but it's never a thing of like, oh my God, like the worst thing in the world is so bad that you never can like recover from it. So I just looked at it from that perspective and was like, all right, well, we're just gonna go do this.
It a shot.
Yeah, and see what happens. So that like I for me it was just, okay, am I making enough money to sustain my current living expenses and environment? And if that's the case, then yes, I will go full time on it. And that's kind of what like led to my jumping over the ship. And then also like, I'm gonna be real, I realized that there's no one in Web3 gaming that makes content the way I make it. Like most people in Web3 gaming, their entire mantra is, how do I shill every single token and extract value from shilling every token, and yelling at the
nuts here.
At the wider gaming ethos and being like, oh my God, guys, this game is so amazing, and the game looks like shit, but they have there's a token that's going up in value. So when I looked at it, I'm like, and still today, I think that holds true. There's less people who are good at making gaming content in Web3 gaming than there are people who are good at just making token content. And token content, I think, is like bare minimum easy content, because in a bull run, everyone looks like a winner. But in gaming content, you have to actually emotionally connect with people. Like, because it's a form of comedy, it's a form of like understanding. If your whole brand is, it's entertainment. And entertainment doesn't work the same way for everyone. So there's a lot of factors you have to think about when you're like saying, oh, I'm going to be a gaming content creator. It's like, okay, are there enough sustainable games in the niche you want to be in to actually be able to make content, to be able to make a living? In Web 2, there are a ton of games. In Web 3, there's a ton of money. So the deals are slightly higher in Web 3, but Web 3 has the same issue that Web 2 doesn't run into, where it's like, in Web 2, you have a game like Fortnite where there are a ridiculous amount of content creators. In Web 3, you could have a game that's trying to do something similar, or just like any game, and they could struggle to find content creators that can create content that actually resonates with gamers, audiences that will play these games to make the tokens, you know, hopefully sustainable. Because not everybody and not everybody's going to just be the guy who comes in and trades. Most gamers, especially in like consumer nations, they care less about how do I make as much money as possible, and more about how do I just do something that takes me away from like my everyday life of work. And I think that's where like we've seen a big disconnect in Web3 is like, you got a world of content creators and games that are like prioritizing just for the token. And that's great. Like, yeah, you need to raise money if you're a game so you can keep building. But then you get to a point where like, eventually you can't just build on speculation forever. You got to launch a product. And if you don't launch a product, of course, like you die. But if you do decide to launch a product, you got to actually have a world where you can go out and get gamers interested, or you're kind of fucked. Yeah. And if you can't get there, eventually the token's going to go down anyway. Which we see in a lot of these games, like a lot of these Web3 or play-to-earn games. So even though you don't make, I think as a gaming content creator, you don't make as much in the Web2 space based on the size of the audience, your impact can be much larger in Web3 if you are making gaming content, because you aren't the guy that people go to when they're just looking for occasional token show.
Exactly. Do you think that what kind of differentiated you in the market from all other content creators at that time was the authenticity and the focus on pretty much gameplay first, and not necessarily the token side and the financial side of things, but more on the holistic view of the actual game and being entertaining and actually approaching the entire thing as a gamer streamer, like as a streamer who is putting a show and putting entertainment in the front and not necessarily financial advice or pseudo advice.
100%. I think that, like, although, and it's interesting because you have to know, like, there's different constituents in Web3 gaming, and based on the constituents, you have a different understanding of subsets of, like, who you're targeting with a given video. I mean, I'm gonna be real. If I wanted to go the route of making trading content and, like, this thing will 100x, I know I could build a YouTube channel that could do a couple 100,000 subs very quickly, because ultimately you're just playing on, can you guess winners versus losers and make people feel like they're making money? Like, your whole idea is, like, can you speculate enough to give people alpha?
Yeah, but that's soulless and that's a short game.
Well, it's not a short game. Like, I think you could do it long term, depending on, like, if that's something you want to do or if that's something you want to be known for. But if you want to be known for, like, hey, how do we bring Web3 gaming to the masses, which has always been my, like, focus and outlook, is like, how do we bring Web3 gaming to mass scale adoption? It's not 100 games that have a token out. It's not 1,000 games. It'll be a couple of games, but it will require content creators that already have built up brand recognition in Web 2. And it can't be a Web 2 content creator because their audience already does not know them for crypto. They know them for whatever niche they're in. A guy who plays Fortnite can't talk about crypto, or he's going to be looked at in a taboo way. A guy who so it has to be someone who plays both games but originates from Web 3 but has a very good understanding of Web 2 gaming. So when I look at it, I'm like, yes, you put yourself in a position where, like, in the short term, you might make less money because you're doing less token related stuff, and it might be harder to build a brand in terms of, like, how you consistently grab audience and viewership. But if you have a long-term outlook, and I like to play the long-term game, that this space is going to be a byproduct of the people who come in and create impactful content in a way that doesn't have anything to do with shilling a token, then you're right where you need to be. Like, the audience is right where it needs to be. Because ultimately, I'm gonna be real, I'm not trying to gather more market share in Web3. Like, I think I'm very well known in Web3 gaming. But the problem is, for games to go from 0 to 1, they need authentic people who can be in Web3 but also play Web 2 games and be able to speak to the Web 2 audience without coming off as shilly, scammy, weird, cringe, everything in between. And the only way you can do that is by having a Web3 native brand, but also making high quality Web 2 content, whether it's on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, whatever you want to do. You kind of got to have both sides of the spectrum, or else people are going to always be like, oh, well, I know you for this. I don't want to see you doing something else. So from my perspective, I've always thought that, like, my advantage has been the fact that, like, I care more about how do I just play video games that are interesting and fun and build a brand around myself. And yes, it's very difficult in the Web 2 space, but think about it. If you get to the size, and this is a big if you had a brand in Web 3 gaming and was building synonymously, like, in the same vein in Web 2, and you built a brand to the size of a Kai Cenat, a Shroud, a Jinxie, a Tarek, any of these big streamers, you could play whatever game you want, and anyone that watches you would play that exact same game and not give a damn if it's blockchain native or not, and you would be able, I'm gonna be real, you'd be able to control the market. Similar to what if you've seen a guy named Ansem on Twitter, and how, like, now he pretty much controls the crypto, I would say, the shitcoin market and the meme market and the investing market. Everyone listens to Ansem because he was the golden child of, like, the WIF coin. But he was calling insane plays before WIF. But now people are like, oh my God, this guy's built up...
Associating him with the success of WIF, yeah.
He's built up so much brain and market share where everyone wants to follow what he does because he is kind of the guy who leads this thing. And that only happens by, like, you can't strategically place yourself in that position. It kind of happens by luck, but it happens by being the guy who's swinging the bat enough to actually have a chance to make it happen. So from my perspective, I look at that as like, okay, if I get to the point where my streams are averaging a couple thousand concurrent again, like Lord willing, it takes time, and I build up a big platform on TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, et cetera, as a variety streaming gaming content creator who plays whatever game he wants.
And associated with Web3.
Huge fan base across Web 2 and Web 3. It don't matter what game I'm playing at that point. I could go play Crypto Unicorns. I could go play, I could go play Axie Infinity again. If the game is halfway decent, halfway funny, halfway interesting, people are going to want to play it, and the token will eventually go up as a byproduct of people liking the gameplay. So thus, in a sense, I don't have to be peddling a token to make my living. I can make my living just from playing cool games. And if people want to enter the token side of things, albeit I love trading meme coins on my own side, but I'm not going to put that in front of my brand. It's not me.
Got it.
So that's kind of my overall thought process of how like gaming content to the masses works in Web 2 and Web 3.
That's very interesting. So I want to bring it back to the audience. Like, you started off with an audience that was mainly centered around Axie. Yep. Then we can say you kind of evolved into Counter-Strike. Maybe that's the current state of things. How did your community turn from just from an audience to an actual community? Like, how did that evolve? Where did you saw it kind of take the next step from just them being active on the chat to them actually forming relationships over Discord and and the community starting to become its own entity and its own thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because like when I quit playing Axie, it was like January of 2021 is when I like stopped playing it. So I haven't been playing Counter-Strike the entire time since then. I went from Axie to just making variety Web3 gaming content where I would just stream whatever Web3 games existed and play whatever I wanted. I didn't start playing Counter-Strike until 2023. It was actually April of 2023. So I've been playing Counter-Strike consistently for a year now. That's when I jumped back into the game and said, I'm going to make content on it. And what I realized like very early on was, to be honest, it kind of like hit me by accident, but community and Counter-Strike's a little bit different, because what I realized about Counter-Strike, and this is why I think every gaming content creator that's trying to make gaming content, you should have a game that you play 70% of the time in Web 2, and then the other 30%, you should be playing Web 3 games. And that's been my thought process and driver behind how I do my content. And the reason for this is because, one, if you pick a game like Counter-Strike, like how I did, a lot of people fail to realize is Counter-Strike is mainly European, so people who don't live in the United States. There's still a large conglomerate of people who do play it in the United States, but it's smaller. Most Europeans...
It's huge in Israel, so...
Yeah. So most people in Europe, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, that play Counter-Strike, one, they're also not abrasive to crypto like the West is. So that gives me one strike. That means Counter-Strike's interesting, because if I talk about crypto things, these people aren't going to cringe up and think that it makes no sense. Why? Because they already trade in crypto. They trade skins with cryptocurrency already. So they're already a built-in crypto audience that has nothing to do with Web3. The problem that we've seen in terms of like when people are preaching to these like Counter-Strike players and stuff is you're trying to get them to stop playing a game that has grandfathered in over 20 years of valuable gameplay and built a skin market and economy to go play the new quote-unquote Counter-Strike in Web3 that like might not be around in 6 months when they built in brand trust with Steam, with Valve, with Counter-Strike. So what, instead of being the guy that goes in and says, oh, stop playing Counter-Strike, I play the Counter-Strike because I love the game. And I introduce my audience to the other 30% of Web3 games that I also play because they're interesting, cool, intriguing. So that allows me to promote my core brand or stimulate my core audience and community, which is right now, it's heavily Counter-Strike. I would say about 80% Counter-Strike, 20% Web3 on the Twitch side. So I can stimulate my core community. I can grow with that core community. And I can play Web3 and variety games to also find ways to grow in other lanes and avenues. So I'm not just so hard stuck in Counter-Strike that I can't play other games as I grow. So one thing I realized is like, you could build community. Community is actually like very easy to build. it's all in how you place and build the community and like what you're building the community for. Like, for example, if I had to go completely dark and start over and said, okay, I'm going to build a completely new brand, just use my voice, not use my face so no one knows me. I feel like I could build a community in almost any single niche because half of it is just creating content, ideating, and staying around long enough for you to have that moment where you find a piece of content that does something well.
Yeah,
so
it's just having like an engine, something that people could rally around, something that people could talk about, could connect over.
100%. But I do think, I think that people over prioritize Discord too much. I actually don't like, I have my own Discord community. There's only like 350 people in there, and I think that's like perfect size. But I actually like extremely dislike large Discord groups because I just think they're too convoluted and you don't get to build enough intimate like conversations with people. I'd much rather prefer like if someone's like interacting with me, it's through like, oh my God, they're on my Twitch stream or they're in my Twitter space. Like, well, yeah, I'm actually getting a better connection because I'm gonna be real. I'm in like 20 Discord groups. The only ones I check are the small ones, the ones where there's like a couple, like
the ones that you actually have your friends in.
Yeah, like the affinity groups. Like the big Discord groups are just like a metric, I think, that doesn't really do anything because it's not an active metric. It doesn't. You can't pulsate it or push it or take it anywhere. It's like, oh, we sit on Discord, but it's like unless it's like an actual deep embedded community where you have a reason to be chatting all day. A lot of times it's very hard to get value. I mean, I would say like out of just a large Discord group, personally, in my opinion.
I think that in larger, like Discord or whatever groups, just smaller groups are naturally formed. And then that's usually where people are actually interacting. In Game 7's example is the Guardians. For my first community, -4 is -8. It was the pretty much the Guardians of my first community. That's how I saw it evolve from my own perspective and from my own experience in building communities. It's starting off as something small. It goes into something way bigger. Yeah. And then smaller groups are starting to form out of the bigger thing. That's usually how it is because you're right. Like it's not borderline. It is impossible to be connected to 100,000 or 200,000 or 1 million people at the same time. It doesn't make sense. But those smaller groups are usually formed within the larger group. Yeah. For you, it's interesting because you're streaming, you're live, so they can interact with you live over the chat and interact with each other live over the chat. So Discord here feels almost redundant because that's kind of what Discord is meant to do. It's meant to create those opportunities for people to interact with each other. And if they are already doing it over the chat, what's Discord is for, really? It's just for the offline once you're not really online. Yeah. And it sounds small. I don't think it is. Like 350 isn't small at all. Those groups are great to just offline interactions and that type of stuff. So I want to actually pick your brains a little bit more around, like just from the lessons you've learned. And just to create some value to a potential up-and-coming creator that might be tuning into this as a long form or tuning into the podcast or just catching a short. If you are a small creator now, because I think you are very strategic with how you picked your niche, and maybe somewhat lucky as well because you enjoy Counter-Strike and it's very much on the brink of, let's say, Web 3 to Web 2. You can very much call it almost a Web 2.5 game just because of the nature of how the marketplace is acting. So what are the top 3 things that you would have done now from a strategic standpoint as an up-and-coming creator in order to build what you now have already built?
I think some of the things that I would do differently is, one, I think I would prioritize understanding human psychology a lot more around like when you're making content, because live content is it's fun, it's great, but it's a little bit different than like YouTube or VOD content, or like, and how you construct a video. I think in my early days, I was very much fixated on this idea that, oh, you go live and you make content and then you just post it and like you're going to get results. or I've seen like the best results has always been through ideating around what that video should look like. And I think that the more people realize that like ideating is the most important part of content, and nothing happens by accident most of the time. Like 90% of the time, it's very well strategically placed or ideated. And a lot of people think that like, oh my goodness, this guy just popped off and a video popped off, or like, you know, sometimes. But for the most part, nothing happens truly by accident. There's always like a reason or rationale behind it. So I think that like that's important to understand, that like many people just ideate and they put hours in ideating that go well beyond what we think. And I still think that's something I could improve at, is like how much I ideate over how much I'm like actually just like, oh my gosh, let's just go out and do something. Because it's cool to go fast and all that, but like results matter more than just like being the first guy to do something or going as quickly as possible, because you got to be able to resonate with an audience. So I think ideating is very important. The next thing I think is like giving less of a care about like what other people think of your content that aren't your core audience or viewer base. Because another thing that you run into, especially as you grow in content, is like you run into a lot of people who are envious and jealous. Yeah, they just
for sure.
And to be honest, like there's no world where like someone who's hating, you need to change their opinion. Because to be completely honest, I've had more people who've said, oh, dude, I hated you during this stage, but then when I actually got to learn more about you, I just wanted to apologize because I was completely wrong. Like I
knew
don't
it was
know,
the guy
like,
I hated.
Yeah, and it's like it's just because they don't really know you, and people's first impression of you is normally like what other people say of you. So it's like if someone's saying something about you and they don't really know you, they're just gonna take it at face value. So half the time, you don't even gotta worry about any of the hate shit. So just whenever I see hate now, I just either mute it or just block it, because I'm just like, I don't give a fuck. Like you build around the people who give a damn about you and your following, and really focus on that core audience of people. Because I remember even after I stopped playing Axie, I went all the way down to like, I think I had like 3 concurrent viewers, and then like this last year I averaged like 120 concurrent. Like it was a really good year. But it's like during that time period, it was just me and a couple of people, a core group of people who like just fuck with my content. I'm like, oh well, they're here during this time. Like who cares? Like we'll build back up. We'll do what we got to do. But a lot of people fail to realize like that's super important. Just focusing on like how do you stimulate that core audience? Because if they're enjoying your streams and they're the regulars that are there every day, you're going to grow as a byproduct of like having that sort of connectivity. And then the last thing I would say is like, dig down into your niche, but be strategic about your niche. If you're in Web3 gaming, your whole idea is I want to be a Web3 gaming content creator, which is to me like the most vague fucking term ever. You're just a gaming content creator who like only does Web3 stuff because like you think that it has a token, which is fine. But I think that like you really gotta pick and choose your games. And the reason why I tell everyone like you need to have one main game in Web 2 is because at the very minimum, you are giving yourself like a chance to grow and be valuable to Web 3 games. I'm gonna be real. Like most people that are making Web 3 gaming content aren't gonna become me or Yellow Panther or Jonah Blake or, you know, Ali Straza or any of these big people. And even Ali started with Hearthstone, I think, and now she's doing Parallel. So it's like that interconnectivity of being in a niche.
Yeah, she stayed on the TCG lane though. So
exactly, like having that Web 2 game and the Web 3 game. But most people aren't going to be like that in Web 3 gaming. So it's like, what do? You got to build and find where your niche is and what makes you different and what makes people want to follow and resonate with you. And not just people who are like hoping you make them money and like pump their bags, but people who are actually like, damn, this dude makes my day better. There's a guy in my Twitch chat. We like connected like 6 months ago. He popped in. Bro is like in his early 20s. He has a kid on the way. He was like, bro, I mean, you inspired me. He literally said, like, he DMs me all the time. He's like, you inspired me to keep going. I don't know if I'd still be alive without you. And he has a kid on the way. And he's like, I'm giving the middle name of my child your name, Brycent.
Damn, that's cool.
Yeah. So like I was stunned. It's like the
impact is insane.
Yeah,
the impact is.
It's crazy to think about. And people don't realize like how much of an impact you can have when you're just like empowering others and wanting to see others win. But like, to me, that's like a bigger than any award I could ever get. The fact that someone would be willing to name their kid after me and give it my name, my like Twitch name as their middle name is crazy. So I always think about that and I'm like, your impact doesn't have to look the same, but if you have the right outlook and the right vision, people are going to resonate with it and you are going to grow in some way, shape, or form.
Amazing. I want to go back to something that you said because I wanted to let you finish, but I didn't want to brief over it. You went from a couple of thousands concurrent viewers to 3.
Yeah.
And stayed and kept going. That's a lot of resilience. Now, I would say a lot of people would be disencouraged from going from such a high to such a low. How did you overcome it? Like, what helped you?
Well, you know what's interesting? One thing that I noted was how I got my audience, which was like, yes, I was doing like, of course, like play to earn was huge and I was doing watch to earn. But the crazy thing is there were probably 50 to 100 other Axie creators that tried watch to earn and they couldn't hold anywhere near the numbers I had because they weren't entertaining. So the very root of like my growth as a content creator was like, oh, he's at the borderline, at the very baseline, he's entertaining. So people have to be entertaining and want to watch you to sit there for 4 hours and watch you play a game like Axie and then watch you play other games. So for me, it was at the very minimum, I'm entertaining. And then 2, when I left Axie and went down to 3 viewers, I gave all my Axies away. I gave it back to my scholars and said, hey guys, you can keep these. I'm not playing the game anymore, but like have fun with it. I'm gonna try my own path. So yeah, it was interesting having to go and eat shit and only have 3 viewers. But those times were the times where I was like, wow, I'm connected. Like I connected with people at a different rate. One of those viewers,
are the guys.
Yeah, and one of those viewers right now just recently got a job as like one of the social leads for a Web3 gaming project. And this is a guy from the Philippines that started with nothing. He now has a house. He said he's going to be able to buy a car next week. And it all started with being in my stream, he said, and making a little bit of money, being a part of it, being empowered, understanding like how I am like personally, and taking that same mentality and going out and changing his world. So he went from lower class citizen in the Philippines to house, a car, a nice paying job outside of the Philippines, because he took the same mindset I go with, which is become the impossible and go get shit done. There was another guy, I remember another one of my early people that stayed, and this is funny, he actually like met him because he was hating on me in like Twitter. Like he DM'd me like some really fucked up shit. I was like,
beast.
Yeah, well, this guy wasn't even Twitter beast, but he just DM'd me. It was mad about not having a scholarship and like calling me a fraud. And I just started chatting with him and learning about the things he was going through. Now that same guy has graduated university. He's off on a positive path. At one point he was thinking about committing suicide. Now he's like changing the world, doing great things in his own community. And then one of the other people who's like, he's now my co-founder on my own startup that we're working on. He was just a guy from Argentina, no money, like living in like a 1 or 2 bedroom house that with no AC or anything. And he's now my co-founder. He's going to be my CTO. So it's like those people who stick around, you never know how they change your life. And without a doubt, they've changed mine, and being able to be a part of their lives and grow with them. So I look at it as like, damn, I'm just privileged to be able to just do this every day. And my thought process was always like, if I just made enough money to be able to do what I do every day and live in a nice area and like have a good living, that's great. Now I'm realizing it's like, okay, it's having that, but it's also investing. So once you turn like 50, 60, you have some money and shit left over.
Yeah, there's the financial side. And the financial side, and there's the impact side. Because once you get it for you, and once you're like, okay, now I'm good, you want to help others together as well.
100%.
And that's exactly what you're doing with your community and picking up people and reaching and letting them participate in other stuff that you do as your day ones. And I think that everyone that has built a community feels it. We're saying it in Game 7. I saw it in -4. It's usually the same thing, like with every community. You see people that are there from day one, just go up the scale and start to do more and more and start to branch out and do their own stuff also, which is amazing, because that's what it's all about. It's about growing together and getting value from yourself to them and back from them to you, and just building on top of it.
100%.
So yeah, that's amazing.
And that's all I want to see. I want to see people grow. I care less about like, oh, how do I just make as much money as possible off of my audience? Because I'm going to be real. During the height of the bull run in 2021, where I didn't take a single deal, man, there were games that would message me, offer me $15K for one tweet, $15,000. I wasn't making that type of money back then. I was just making whatever I would make off of Twitch. I didn't take a single deal. Didn't shill a single token like that. Left all that shit to the side.
So
it's like, yeah, life finds a way to like come back to you. Like, thank God that like I'm in good shape. But it's like I see so many people shill so many tokens, so many rug pulls, so much bullshit that failed.
And now
it's
gone.
like,
so
and they wonder why like things don't go
the community is gone.
Exactly. One thing could mess up your entire community and mess up your brand. So it's like, why risk it for something as little as 15K?
Yeah, exactly. Because you can build something that is way bigger and way more impactful, which will result in more capital also. It's strategically sound from both ends, not just from your perspective as a person to just not shield something that you don't necessarily know the team behind, which we saw a lot of in the last couple of years, but also understanding that the longer term play, the ones that will be more financially beneficial, is keeping your own brand. So
yeah, 100% agree.
That's amazing. Okay, that was great. I very much enjoyed it.
That was a fun combo. It went by so quick too.
Yeah, it was super quick. We're trying to keep it to 45 minutes ish for the first episode, but we'll definitely have you again because we have a lot of more stuff to discuss and unpack. But before we end, where can people find you?
Well, always on Twitch, twitch.tv/Brycent, but you can also find me on TikTok, Twitter, Brycent_. You'll hear about my musings and me just talking about stuff across Web3 and Web2 gaming. So a couple places you can find me, and, I'm always around.
Nice. That was amazing. I very much enjoyed it. I think specifically for aspiring content creators, I think this conversation could be amazing and very beneficial. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening in to this episode. As you know, your support is very important to bring even more incredible guests to this show. So if you can consider subscribing, following, sharing, every little bit helps us. If you help the show by supporting it in any way, all that I can promise is that I'll do my best to make the show better and better as time passes. Thank you very much, Brycent, and thank you all.
Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.